In a shocking turn of events, a farmer stumbles upon a mysterious hole in his cornfield. Curiosity leads him to explore, but what he discovers inside sends him running for help. This incredible story unfolds as the cops are called to investigate the bizarre find. Bobby Wayne was going about his usual morning routine when his phone rang. Joshua, one of his field workers, sounded unusually excited. "Mr. Wayne, you won't believe what I've found in the South Field?" Joshua exclaimed. Skeptical and slightly annoyed, Bobby assumed it was some kind of prank. "Joshua, if this is a joke, you can pick up your last paycheck today," he warned. Despite his doubts, Bobby decided to humor the young man. He hopped into his pickup truck and drove out to the field, fully expecting to find nothing out of the ordinary. As he approached, he saw Joshua waving frantically. Anger flashed across Bobby's face, but it quickly turned to shock as he looked past Joshua. There, in the middle of his cornfield, was a gaping hole. It wasn't just any hole, it was massive, dark, and seemed to lead straight into the earth. Bobby's jaw dropped as he stepped out of the truck, his eyes fixed on the impossible sight before him. "What in the world?" Bobby muttered, his voice barely audible as he approached the hole's edge. Bobby and Joshua stood at the hole's edge, peering into the darkness. The hole was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It wasn't a simple sinkhole or a meteor crater. The edges were too smooth, too perfect. "How deep do you think it goes?" Joshua asked, his voice echoing slightly. Bobby picked up a small rock and tossed it in. They listened, straining their ears, but never heard it hit bottom. "I don't know, but it's deep," Bobby replied, a mix of fear and curiosity. Bobby's mind raced as they stood there, trying to understand what they saw. Should he call the authorities? The local news? Or should he investigate further? The rational part of his brain told him to call for help, but another part that had always dreamed of adventure urged him to explore. "Joshua," Bobby said, turning to his young worker, "what do you think about going down there?" Joshua's eyes widened with excitement. "Are you serious? That would be incredible." Bobby nodded, his decision made. "All right, but we need to be prepared. Let's head back to the farmhouse and gather some supplies." Back at the farmhouse, Bobby and Joshua began gathering supplies. In a dusty chest in the barn, they found old climbing ropes and harnesses. Bobby's grandfather had been an avid climber, and these tools had been passed down through the generations. "These ropes are still in good condition," Joshua said, inspecting them closely. "They should hold our weight." Bobby nodded, then went to fetch some lanterns and flashlights. He also packed a first aid kit, water, and energy bars. "We don't know how long we'll be down there," he explained. As they were packing, Bobby's wife, Brittany, walked in. "What are you two up to?" she asked, eyeing the equipment suspiciously. Bobby hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell her the truth. "We found something strange in the South Field. A hole. We're going to check it out." Brittany's face paled. "A hole? Bobby, that sounds dangerous. Maybe you should call someone?" "We'll be fine, honey," Bobby assured her. "We're just going to take a quick look. If it seems too dangerous, we'll come back up and call the authorities." Brittany didn't look convinced, but she knew her husband well enough to know that once he set his mind to something, there was no change. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said, her voice filled with concern. Bobby hugged her tightly. "I promise. We'll be back before you know it." Bobby and Joshua returned to the field with their gear packed and ready. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the cornfield. The hole seemed even more ominous in the fading light. They set up their equipment at the hole's edge, securing the ropes to Bobby's truck. Joshua, being the more experienced climber, went down first. Bobby watched anxiously as Joshua disappeared into the darkness. "It's all clear," Joshua's voice echoed up after a few minutes. "Come on down, Mr. Wayne." Taking a deep breath, Bobby began his descent. The walls of the hole were smooth, almost polished. As he went deeper, the temperature dropped noticeably. The light from above grew fainter until it was just a tiny circle in the darkness above. Finally, Bobby's feet touched solid ground. He switched on his lantern, illuminating the cavern around them. What they saw left them speechless. The cavern was enormous, stretching farther than their lights could reach, but it wasn't the size that amazed them. It was what filled the space. Scattered throughout the cavern were structures that looked like ancient buildings. Crude huts of stone and wood stood alongside more elaborate structures resembling temples. "This is impossible," Bobby whispered, his voice filled with awe. "How could all this be here, right under my farm?" As they explored further, they found artifacts scattered everywhere. Stone tools, primitive weapons, and beautifully crafted pottery lined makeshift shelves carved into the cavern walls. "Mr. Wayne," Joshua called out, his voice trembling slightly. "You need to see this." Bobby made his way to Joshua's standing. In front of them was a wall covered in intricate cave paintings. The images depicted people, animals, and a great battle. "These paintings," Bobby said, running his hand gently over the surface. "They're incredible, but how old are they? And who made them?" They encountered something that made their blood run cold as they continued their exploration. They saw human skeletons in a small alcove illuminated by their lantern light. Bobby shook his head, unable to form words. The sight of the skeletons had shaken him to his core. "Mr. Wayne," Joshua said, his voice quivering. "Who were these people? How long have they been down here?" Before Bobby could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cavern. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. "Earthquake!" Bobby shouted. "We need to get out of here!" They ran back towards their ropes, dodging falling debris as they went. The rumbling grew louder, and cracks appeared in the cavern floor. Just as they reached their ropes, Bobby spotted something out of the corner of his eye. It was a small, metallic object, half buried in the dirt. Despite the danger, he couldn't resist grabbing it before they began their ascent. They climbed as quickly as they could, the sounds of the collapsing cavern echoing below them. As they neared the surface, Bobby couldn't shake the image of the skeletons and the strange object he had picked up. Finally, they emerged from the hole, gasping for air. The ground was still shaking and they could hear the distant rumble of the cavern collapsing in on itself. "We need to call for help," Bobby said, reaching for his phone with shaking hands. "Whatever's down there, it's not safe." As Bobby dialed 911, Joshua stared at the hole, his face pale. "Mr. Wayne," he said slowly, "what do you think we just discovered?" Bobby shook his head, still trying to process everything they had seen. "I don't know, Joshua, but I have a feeling our lives are about to change forever." As sirens wailed in the distance, Bobby examined the object he had grabbed from the cavern. "What is that?" Joshua asked, peering at the object. "I'm not sure," Bobby replied, "but I feel it might be the key to understanding what's down there." The police arrived first, followed closely by fire trucks and ambulances. The area around the hole was quickly cordoned off, and Bobby and Joshua were ushered away for questioning. "So, let me get this straight," Detective Anna Carl said, her pen poised over her notepad. "You found a hole in your field, decided to explore it without notifying anyone, and discovered an underground city with human remains?" Bobby nodded, aware of how unbelievable it sounded. "I know it seems crazy, but it's true. And there's more." He pulled out the metallic object. "I found this down there." Detective Carl's eyes widened as she examined the object. "Mr. Wayne, I'm going to have to confiscate this. We need to get it analyzed." Before long, the farm became a hive of activity. News vans arrived, their satellite dishes reaching into the sky. Curious onlookers gathered at the edges of the property, held back by police barriers. Bobby's wife Brittany arrived, her face etched with worry. "Bobby, are you all right? What's going on?" Bobby hugged her tightly, relieved to see a familiar face amidst the chaos. "I'm fine, honey. It's just... things have gotten a bit complicated." As Bobby filled Brittany in on the events of the day, a team of geologists arrived on the scene. They set up equipment around the hole and took measurements and soil samples. "Mr. Wayne," one of the geologists called out, "we're picking up some unusual readings from the hole. There seems to be a network of caverns extending far beyond your property." The implications of this discovery were staggering. How far did these caverns go? And more importantly, what secrets did they hold? More experts arrived. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and even government representatives converged on the farm. The quiet cornfield had become the center of a scientific and potentially historic discovery. As dawn broke, Bobby stood at the edge of his field watching the sun rise over the cornfields. His farm, which had been in his family for generations, would never be the same. The hole had changed everything. Detective Carl approached Bobby, her face etched with confusion. "Mr. Wayne, we need to talk. After extensive analysis, we're still unable to determine the nature or origin of this hole. It's puzzling, to say the least." Bobby's heart raced as he followed the detective to a makeshift research station near the hole. A team of geologists, archaeologists, and other scientists were gathered around various instruments, their faces a mix of frustration and bewilderment. One of the lead researchers turned to Bobby, shaking his head. "Mr. Wayne, this hole defies all our understanding of geological formations. Its perfectly circular shape, smooth walls, and constant temperature, regardless of depth, make no sense. We've used every tool, from ground-penetrating radar to spectral analysis, and we're no closer to explaining its existence or purpose than when we started." The implications of this mystery were both thrilling and terrifying. They hadn't just found an unexplained hole, they had stumbled upon something that challenged the very foundations of scientific understanding. As word of the baffling discovery spread, Bobby's farm became the epicenter of wild speculation and intense scrutiny. Theories abounded. Some believed it was an ancient civilization that had developed in isolation. Others suggested a lost tribe with advanced knowledge that had been forgotten. But the truth, as it often is, was more complex than anyone could have imagined. Joshua first put the pieces together. "Mr. Wayne," he said one evening as they watched the archaeologists work, "I think I've figured it out. These aren't just ancient artifacts. I think we've stumbled upon a hidden society." Bobby looked at him in confusion. "A hidden society? What do you mean?" Joshua explained his theory, pointing to a civilization that deliberately secluded itself from the outside world. "I think," Joshua said, his voice filled with awe, "that we've discovered a group of people who chose to live underground, developing their technology and culture in isolation. But why here? Why now?" As wild as it seemed, Joshua's theory began to gain traction among the scientists. It explained the inexplicable anachronistic elements they had found in the caverns. But it also opened up a Pandora's box of questions. What did this mean for our understanding of history if this was indeed a hidden society? Had they changed the course of archaeological study just by discovering it? And what about the people who created this underground world? What had driven them to such extreme isolation? The farm became a restricted area guarded by security personnel. The excavation of the mysterious hole on Bobby Wayne's farm intensified. Teams of archaeologists, geologists, and other specialists worked around the clock, carefully removing layer after layer of soil and rock. Slowly, a tentative picture began to emerge through archaeological discovery and painstaking attempts to decode the strange symbols found on the artifacts. However, researchers quickly emphasized that much of what they proposed was still theoretical, with significant gaps in their understanding. Dr. Leanna Keaton, the lead archaeologist on the project, held a press conference to share their preliminary findings. "We believe, and I stress, this is still a working theory, that the underground structure wasn't just a settlement but potentially a deliberately constructed haven. It may have been designed to preserve a unique way of life apart from the outside world, but we are still far from understanding why." The skeletal remains found in the cavern posed another intriguing puzzle. Initial analysis suggested they weren't the result of some unknown species as first speculated, but rather of humans who had potentially adapted to life underground over many generations. Dr. Keaton explained, "The bone structure shows signs consistent with living in low-light conditions and navigating tight spaces. However, we're missing crucial pieces of the timeline. How long were these people down there? What drove them underground in the first place? These are questions we're still grappling with." Perhaps the most enigmatic find was the metallic object Bobby had discovered. Upon closer examination, it appeared to be a key containing intricate mechanisms that seemed part of a complex locking system. "This artifact hints at the society's emphasis on security and secrecy," Dr. Keaton noted, "but it's also frustratingly advanced for what we'd expect from an isolated underground community. We're still trying to reconcile this technological sophistication with the other evidence we've found." Despite months of intensive study, the researchers admitted they were far from a complete understanding of the underground civilization. "Every answer we uncover seems to raise a dozen new questions," Dr. Keaton confessed. "We're dealing with a society that challenges our understanding of human adaptation and technological development. It's both exciting and humbling." While groundbreaking, the team's findings were met with skepticism from some quarters of the scientific community. Critics pointed out the lack of a clear chronology and the absence of certain expected archaeological markers. "We acknowledge these gaps in our research," Dr. Keaton responded. "We're presenting this as a theory, not a conclusion. There's still so much we don't know." As the research continued, the site remained under strict government control, with limited access even to the scientific team. This level of secrecy only fueled public speculation about what other discoveries might be hidden from view. Bobby Wayne watched these developments from afar, and the theories and speculations did little to ease his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the true nature of the underground civilization was far stranger than anyone suspected. But amidst the mystery, there was also wonder. The knowledge brought from this underground world could potentially change our understanding of human history and capabilities. Perhaps, armed with the knowledge of this hidden society, historians and archaeologists could uncover more such enclaves worldwide. Bobby became more than just a witness to the unfolding discoveries as the weeks turned into months. His intimate knowledge of the land passed down through generations of farmers proved invaluable to the research teams. He could tell them about subtle changes in the soil, underground water patterns, and how the land had shifted over decades. This information, combined with cutting-edge scientific analysis, helped researchers map out the extent of the underground complex and understand how it had remained hidden for so long. Joshua, too, found his role evolving. His quick thinking and bravery during their initial exploration earned him the scientific community's respect. He has worked alongside archaeologists and historians, and his practical experience has complemented their academic knowledge. He had a knack for understanding the practical aspects of underground society, how they might have sourced food and water, dealt with waste, and maintained air quality in their underground home. As the sun set on another day of discovery and wonder, Bobby knew the adventure was far from over. It was just beginning. The hole in his field had changed everything, not just for him and his small farming community, but for the world's understanding of human history and potential. As he stood there, watching the last light fade from the sky, Bobby Wayne realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from looking up at the stars, but from looking down at the ground beneath our feet. Bobby Wayne's discovery of a strange hole forever changed his quiet farming life. What would you do if you found a mysterious hole on your property? Have you ever encountered something inexplicable that made you want to call the authorities? Share your thoughts in the comments.